Favorite right here. This is called a cheese sausage. In Italy, it's called chevallard. They put cheese in there, parsley in there, and you can't get that everywhere. That's a specialty. I like that on a barbecue with plenty of onions. It's healthy. Sausage. And don't believe cholesterol. Everything's cholesterol. I've been eating that for 50, 60 years. Not too bad. My cholesterol, 800, but it don't mean nothing. When it gets to 1,000, I'm going to sell. There you go. Don't worry about what everybody tells you. You're going to get sick with this or sick with that. Sit down, enjoy the meal, and say, thank God that you can swallow. That's the secret of eating.
Hello.
4 more years.
Donald Trump is your president, if you like it or not.
We love you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
It's gonna be me.
The end of the road, still you can't let go. And I know that my heart will. Oh, say does that star spangled.
There she was, just walking down the street singing.
Well, she gave you everything up you at the end.
I'm not right, I'm not left, I'm not Republican, I'm not Democrat, I'm not libertarian. I'm a human fucking being, and I want what's best for the other human beings. And I want some common sense. And I want to be left alone, and I want to pay low taxes. And I want to be able to build and prosper, and I want all the things that were promised to me in the Constitution of this country. And until we all stop identifying with left or right or Republican or Democrat or gay, straight or black or white, all the shit, until we figure that out, we're going to continue to be abused by all these people that have power. Cheers.
Joe Rossinello. I mean, the chick with the finger.
She's
now
not.
That's kind of funny. The thing that struck me is that, look, we've lost followers. Not that we have millions of followers, but we've lost. Our numbers have gone down because we've been critical of Trump. Like we are capable of criticizing Hefe. Okay. And that woman throwing the finger thinks that we're in a cult because guess what? If he ran for a 4th term, I'd probably vote for him again.
I would too.
She says we're in a cult. But in the meantime, if you disagree with anybody in her party, okay, you are cut off. Just look at RFK Jr., just look at Tulsi Gabbard. They're still Democrats. They haven't changed party affiliation. They're just in this administration. They're the ones who are not in a cult. That woman with the finger with the dog, and she just keeps walking by every single day with the digit out. She's the cult member. I mean, that's not me just hurling stones back. It's like, what are you talking about? We question our leaders, okay? I like Ted Cruz. I've questioned Ted Cruz and criticized him severely, and many other people who I would vote for if I was in their state or their district. I'm not in a cult. You are. They need to get that through their head, Joe. It's kind of laughable. I don't know if you agree with me or not.
What I do agree 100% with is the sausage that Pat Cooper was
Yeah. Yeah. Now
That
that's
is fantastic, dude.
that's the real deal. By the
I've
way,
never
I've heard
heard of that, actually. Have you ever
what,
heard of
sausage
that?
with cheese in it. Yeah. Like when they're mixing the sausage, they throw cheese in it. So when you grill the sausage, the cheese melts. It's fantastic. It's no, it's absolutely fantastic. And the part about his cholesterol, I agree 1,000%. They tell me it's 800. Who cares? That's
So,
me. All right. Okay. We're all gonna die someday. Do me a
I've been
favor.
doing this
Leave
for
me
50,
alone.
60 years. Look. Awesome.
No, that's fantastic. We got a great show for you today. Welcome everybody to the front line with Joe and Joe. We're going way into the breach again. The Iran war. Don't know what's going to happen. We got a clip from that. Joe and I are going to discuss. Anybody who says they know the outcome tomorrow, the next day, or the next day is just really, really kind of like speculating. The Save Act. I don't even know why. I mean, we have to talk about the Save Act, but it hurts me in my soul, Joe, that we actually have to talk about something that's so obviously popular, should be very easy to pass, should get Democrat votes, and is not. Trump wants, again, our criticisms of Trump notwithstanding, he's smarter than them. He absolutely is smarter than them. We're going to talk about that because they're all in a tizzy because he's recommending something that we're going to play a clip that banks ought to do to help to combat illegal immigration. And the left is all up in arms. Pierre Poilievre, for our Canadian friends, he gives Joe Rogan basically a first grader's education on inflation, because inflation can be understood, Joe Rossinello, by a first grader. Okay, it really is a simple concept, and it's one of those things that you really don't want to do or you don't want to have a lot of. All right, and listen, and finally we're going to wrap up the show later on talking about Zoran Mamdani, the communist mayor of New York City. Sorry, New Yorkers, but you get what you paid for, or you got what you asked for, you got what you voted for, and when your life is affected by it, don't come bitching to Joe and I, because we're not listening. Joe, let's go to the Middle East.
Foreign ministers from across the Gulf region met in Riyadh to discuss the conflict's spread. But while those talks were happening, Iran launched missiles targeting the Saudi capital. All were intercepted, but falling debris injured several people. The Saudi foreign minister accused Iran of trying to intimidate Gulf leaders and said it would not succeed.
The targeting of Riyadh while a number of diplomats are meeting, I cannot see as coincidental. And I think that's the clearest signal of how Iran feels about diplomacy. It doesn't believe in talking to its neighbors. It tries to pressure its neighbors. And what I can say categorically, that's not going to work. The kingdom is not going to succumb to pressure. And on the contrary, this pressure will backfire.
The Saudi foreign minister also said the patience of GCC countries was not unlimited, and that if Tehran's attacks on its neighbours continue, they reserve the right to take military action against Iran once all diplomatic options have been exhausted.
But what I care about now is that the attacks on my country and on my neighboring countries that are not involved in this conflict end. That's all I'm interested in. And we're going to use every lever we have, political, economic, diplomatic, and elsewise, to get these attacks to stop. That's what I care about.
And that's what he ought to care about, to be honest with you. I mean, that's why I said I don't have an answer to that. But are you going to be shocked, Joe Rossinello, if you woke up one day this week, all right, and other Middle Eastern countries are involved in this war because they're being forced to, out of probably their on some level their own self-interest? I wouldn't be shocked. That's why I'm not in favor of this action, because no matter how smart or all the brainiacs in the White House think they are, you can't predict what's going to happen. There are too many moving parts. Now all of a sudden you're going to get Saudi Arabia involved in this war. Joe, I got to hand it to you because I don't get it. And now it's too late. You can't just say we're going to stop unless I'm wrong about that. You got to keep going now. Joe, where am I wrong?
Well, this war is about one thing and one thing only: control of the Straits of Hormuz. That's what this war is about. At the end of the day, Iran is the power center that controls that strait. And ultimately, there's two goals here. Israel has a vested interest in the region, Obviously, they have used their influence to have this war start. Don't take my word for it. Marco Rubio said it. It's on tape. He said, we were afraid that they were going to take action. This was basically the path of least resistance. Marco Rubio said that. So I do believe that they were going to make a move. And in a sense, it kind of pushed Trump's hand to a degree. But we also have an interest here that's outside of Israel. The interest is the control of the Straits of Hormuz, because ultimately that controls a lot of the oil flow for the entire world. That is why the Japanese prime minister was in the White House this week, because 90% of the Japanese oil that is used comes from that strait. And she's basically saying to Trump, listen, I need oil. And if this thing gets shut down, we're done. That's what that meeting was about. But ultimately, Trump, while he has his one ear open to Israel, Trump also has other interests. That's why we have bases in the Middle East. And that is why he's very concerned about that strait. People say, who's going to be the winner of this? How's the outcome? What's the goal? This is the goal. Whoever ends up controlling that strait wins. That's the end game. And Trump don't think he does not have that desire. That's why, in many ways, in my opinion, he went into Venezuela to control that oil source. And there is some chips on the table that he's also looking to control that strait. Whether he's successful or not, that remains to be seen. Many people don't think he will be. We shall see. But to your point, Joe Pasillo, this war can go in a million different directions. Here you have Saudi Arabia saying that they're going to be all in militarily, use every single level of power that they have. Who knows who else weighs in? What if Pakistan weighs in? They have a nuclear bomb. They're friends with Iran. What if Russia weighs in? What if China weighs in? A lot of oil goes through that strait, and those people need it. Again, that's the key to this conflict from the American perspective. Israel has another perspective.
Well, right. And Joe, here's the thing. What happened to all the talk about being energy independent and not relying on the Middle East to disentangle ourselves? I mean, and that's not me saying it. This was them saying it. We have enough oil. We can produce our own oil. If the environmentalist wackos will just let us drill, if the government will let us drill. Well, what happened to all that talk? Now, all of a sudden, we're talking, and you're right. I'm not saying you're wrong. Now, all of a sudden, we're talking about the Straits of Hormuz and the price of oil on the international market. Let Japan worry about Japan. I mean, if America was energy independent, let Japan worry about Japan. Let other countries worry about themselves. You know, and obviously no fan of Nicolas Maduro. Okay. But then again, it's the same thing. Okay. But we went in there and we took him out. And again, we know that in large part that has to do with oil, having a friendly regime in Venezuela, because they single-handedly have the largest oil reserves in the world. What happened to all the talk about us producing our own energy so that we're not getting involved in all this stuff?
Well, I don't think it's about our oil. I think it's about power, Joe. Because to be honest with you, we don't really. In fact, I think we only get 2% of our oil from that strait. Trump is interested in power. This is where, to be honest with you, one could say from a Catholic perspective, this was not a just conflict. Because while Israel has skin in the game and they want chaos in the region, they're looking to possibly, many people say, expand greater Israel to be basically the hegemon of that region. I mean, there's a lot of conversation going on the internet. We also have interests, and the interest is power. That's why we have all those bases there. That's why he established the what's it called? The Abraham Accords. He is building alliances there to secure the oil, which means power for the United States. Trump is not just arbitrarily acting. He's made a bet, as all people make bets. And that is either going to be a winner or a loser. Who knows where it's going to go? It could turn out to be a loser. And that could mean as much as a nuclear event down the road.
But that's one of the things that was being thrown around a couple of weeks ago, was that I guess it was, I forgot who Tucker Carlson had on, And his guest said that basically, and anybody in the chat room, we have a lively chat today. We have a couple newcomers. Well, Antonella's here. Hi, Antonella. Carabene's here. EC2, Nick Lon, Lightbearer, few others. We got a decent crowd going. But Joe, this is, I mean, according to, I forget, I should have remembered, but according to whoever the guest was on Tucker Carlson, said that Israel threatened to use a nuclear weapon against Iran. And part of me says, that's a believable story.
No, it's very believable. I actually, here's one thing we do know already. What Trump hoped to happen immediately is that the people were going to overthrow the power structure in Iran. That didn't happen. So that is off, and I don't think it's going to. That would have happened immediately. In fact, many people are saying because he took out who he took out, it's only made the people dig in even that much more. Now, obviously, all this bombing puts the country back. It's going to take time for them to get back to where they were. But when they do, what then happens? Now you kicked over a hornet's nest. You have Israel, who has a nuclear bomb, and you have Pakistan, who's willing to give a bomb. And they've said this. They said, in fact, Iran said we can get a nuclear bomb in 2 weeks. That's what they said. And they would get it from Pakistan. So ultimately, where does this go down the road? Because ultimately, Iran doesn't seem to be like, they're not overthrowing the religious leaders of the nation. That's what Trump hoped to happen immediately. It didn't happen. So where does this go, say, 7 years from now, 10 years from now?
I don't know. And that's the problem is that, look, I'm the first one to say America's America, and we need to project American power, okay, and the threat of American power overseas, okay, with people who are, let's say, hostile actors, all right? But the fact is, you know damn well, and I know this is going to be a controversial statement. They say, well, the Arabs or the Muslims in Iran, they hate the Jews so much. They hate each other, quite frankly. If you listen to the words of Bibi Netanyahu over the last 30 years or so, 30 years or more, okay, he's been itching for this for a very long time. There's no doubt in my mind Israel would have taken out Iran with a nuclear weapon. No doubt in my mind whatsoever. And then they're going to, in turn, let's say for argument's sake, they were able to get one, and then they launch one on Israel. Then what happens? What happens next? You can't, if something like that, Joe, you remember the Cold War, we were kids, all right? And there was a lot of propaganda around the Cold War, but you know what you had that was true? They had the Soviet Union and the United States had a mutual interest in not using nuclear weapons. Both regimes want to survive. American government wants to survive. The Soviet government wanted to survive, and they're not going to take each other out. And there was a deterrent for having both. These people freaking hate each other. And yeah, Bibi Netanyahu's level of hatred for Muslims, okay, and he'll say because they attack us all he wants. The guy obviously hates these people. Okay, there's no doubt in my mind that story is true and that he did threaten to use a nuclear weapon, and Iran would do it in a second because they don't care. I mean, am I wrong about this?
No, the nuclear threat is very real and has to be taken serious. That goes all the way back to Kennedy. John Kennedy, who was assassinated by the CIA, did not want Israel to have a nuclear bomb and said it openly. Lyndon Johnson gave it to them. He permitted it under his presidency. That was the mistake. It tilted the power structure in the Middle East. That should never, ever, ever should have been allowed. Never. And because Israel has a nuclear bomb, Iran is going to pursue it because they know if they don't, they will get pushed around. That's why North Korea doesn't get pushed around, because they have a nuclear bomb and people are aware of it. It sends a signal to countries. They understand that. The North Koreans understood that. I have a nuclear bomb. If you pull some CIA operation in my country and try to topple me, I will take out San Francisco. Yeah, or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Right. It's that threat. So they are left alone. And that is exactly what Iran is going to continue to pursue because, again, we kicked over the hornet's nest. Ultimately, though, in the short term and in the long term, the war is about two things. It's obviously, it has an Israeli point of view, but it also has an oil point of view. The Straits of Hormuz is a very, very strategic choke point. It's a power point, and don't think Trump doesn't have his eye on it.
No, no, I'm gonna go ahead and agree with you. Let's all pray for the best, because right now, being that we don't know, God knows what's going to happen. So we need to pray for some sort of a resolution to this, because it's going to be tragic, Joe. It's going to be. I mean, you're going to be talking about millions of dead people. All right, dead bodies. If in fact anything like that was to occur when it comes to nuclear weapons. You're with the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Resinello. Great crowd today. Thanks, guys, for coming by on a Sunday afternoon. You talk about shifting power. One of the things that would shift power away from our tyrannical government and back to the people is if we had election integrity.
It's about passing it. And I think we are, Mr. President. I know you are. We need to try to pass this legislation through reconciliation. Now, you know how reconciliation works, Mr. President. It means we can pass this bill with 50 Republican votes and the vice president to break the tie. That's how we pass the one big, beautiful bill. I would hope to get some of my Democratic friends to support us, but we don't have to have them. That's harder than I describe because, as you know, Mr. President, there are parameters on reconciliation. Anything you propose through reconciliation has to be paid for. We can find the money to pay for it. And anything you pass through reconciliation has to conform with the contours of the Budget Control Act. We call that giving a provision a bird bath. And our parliamentarian decides what passes muster under the Budget Control Act and what doesn't. Now, we've got a lot of smart lawyers in the United States Senate. Every single one of them thinks they're Oliver Wendell Scalia. But we've got a lot of other smart lawyers in America. Here's what I'm getting at. We have yet to try going to these smart lawyers, some in the Senate and some, believe it or not in the Senate, and saying, craft us a SAVE Act that will pass muster under the Budget Control Act and can be blessed by the parliamentarian. And some of my colleagues, those Oliver Wendell Scalia types, they say, Kennedy, you know, that you'll never be able to do that. They don't know. I've been here 10 years. I've seen things pass muster, survive a bird bath that I didn't think had a hope in hell. And I've seen provisions pass the parliamentarians' judgment under a bird bath that I thought, I've seen them not pass that I thought were slam dunks. You don't know till you try. And we haven't tried.
You remember in The Godfather, where after Sonny gets killed and Brando has that great scene with Robert Duvall and he's having a drink and he tells him Sonny got shot. And he says, he calls her, says, I want a meeting of 5 families, right? And he goes, this war ends now. He starts that meeting with all the 5 families. And Brando, in his own great Brando-esque way, he went, how did things ever get so far? How did things ever get so far? That's what comes to mind when it comes to the SAVE Act. This is what you got to resort to? Reconciliation and how we could do it? How about you shame every effing Republican in the Senate? Shame every one of them. Primary every one of their asses to say, you won't even pass something that's got 75% of approval rating with the American people.
More than 80%, Joe. It's 71% of Democrats.
Right. How did things ever get so far that John Kennedy, God bless him, has got to start talking about reconciliation and conforming it to the budget, and we'll find the money. We'll find the money. There shouldn't be any money involved. It's very simple. ID, citizenship. That's it. No mail-in ballots. It's pretty simple. This is what the American people want. I don't trust the elections. I don't trust them overseas. I don't trust them when it comes to that little homosexual Zelensky. People say, well, he was democratically elected. That was rigged. All elections are rigged. Our elections are not supposed to be rigged. There's the laws in place where the Federal Elections Commission should be given authority by the executive branch to go into states and clean up their voter rolls. Chuck Schumer said, well, 20 million people are going to get kicked off the voter rolls. Right, because my father, who's been dead for 20 years, who's buried in New Jersey, should be purged from the voter rolls, Senator Schumer. Okay? He shouldn't be able to vote because he's dead. Okay? So Chuck Schumer's right. Yeah, there's going to be 20 million people purged. All fraudulent votes. Joe, you got to help me, Joe. How did things ever get so far, Joe? How did they get so far?
There's a lot there. And why that clip is important is because John Kennedy is putting forth a path forward without the 60 votes, another path forward. And he's right. Why don't we try it? Mike Lee, if you're following this on X as I am, has also put forth a path forward, the talking filibuster. His strategy, and it, to be honest, so far has been working, even though it hasn't been officially declared a talking filibuster, is this: give them the floor and let them talk and put the noose around their own neck because they don't have an argument. And he's 100% right.
Yes, he
is. If you listen to any of the arguments, they're either blatant lies that just get contradicted as soon as that speaker gets done, or, frankly, it's nonsense. And everyone can see it because this is not political. It's common sense. It's straight up and down common sense. Here's the problem. It's the will to do it. Thune can pass this. He could either blow up the filibuster. If he doesn't want to do that, he could take the path of Kennedy, or he could take the path of Mike Lee. Here's the deal. If he does not do that, the kimono has been opened. Thune is done. People see through this. I follow this very closely on X. It is completely clear. Elon Musk put out a tweet. He said, anyone who does not vote for this in the Senate, it's a high act of treason. That has over 50 million views.
Yep.
It is as clear as day to the American people what's going on. They can't get around it. And that's why Mike Lee says, give them the talking filibuster. Let them talk about it and they will hang themselves. If this doesn't pass, to your point, Joe Pasillo, America will no longer absolutely 100% believe in any election ever again.
Why would you?
And no, anyone who's objective, you don't even have to be, to be honest with you, educated. It's common sense. That's why over 80% of America is for this. 71% of Democrats are for this. This is a bipartisan effort, yet they don't want to vote for it. Why? Because this isn't about equity. It's not about common sense. It's about power. And they know if this gets put forth and is enforced, they will not win elections.
Yeah.
And they know this because that's why the border was open.
Do you see how you use the analogy of kicking the hornet's nest when we were talking about Iran? It's the same thing. Thune is so fearful because this is where I don't get Thune. Is he so naive to think that if he kind of does things the right way, whatever that means, okay, about the filibuster and everything else. What do you think is going to happen, Senator Thune? You're so afraid to kick the hornet's nest because you don't want to anger Democrats. They hate your guts. I don't care if you work with them. They can't stand you. They want you to die, actually. We know that about the Democrat Party because they're all in favor of killing unborn children in the womb. So what do you think they'll do to you, Senator Thune? They hate Kennedy. They hate Mike Lee. They hate Ted Cruz. They hate them all. They hate Rand Paul. And what do you get? You got the Democrats know how to stay together. The Republicans do not. What do you think is going to happen if you give them their way and you don't vote for this, Senator Thune? They're going to take the House and the Senate through fraudulent elections. And the first thing they're going to do is do away with the filibuster because they're going to make sure that there's no Joe Manchin or Kristen Sinema that's going to be in the Democrat Party. Because Mark Kelly replaced Kristen Sinema, and I forgot who it was that replaced Manchin. Okay, but the bottom line is this: you have Democrats that they're going to scrap everything. They don't care about rules. They've shown you they don't care about rules. Then why are you afraid to kick them in the teeth? You have them by the throat right now. Now all you have to do is kick them in the teeth, and they're not going to get elected dog catcher except in the bluest of blue parts of this country. you can secure at least we as Republicans, I use that word loosely when it comes to you and me, but we vote that way. Okay. There's a lot of infighting on the Republican side. Not everybody's unified on every issue, but nonetheless, I don't think the Republican Party's insane. I don't think they're insane. I think the Democrats are insane and evil because of the policies they propose. They will wreck this country in a second.
They already did. To be honest,
Well,
the Uniparty has already wrecked the country. The middle class has been gutted. I mean, it's a tragedy. But to be honest, like I said, this is one of these benchmark moments. It shows you how the system does not work, who the system works for, the donor class, and that's who Thune works for, and the rest of it's theater. And that is what has to end. Listen, I voted for Donald Trump, Joe. I'd do it again. He has taken it further than any president in my lifetime as far as fighting for Americans, regular people. Has he been perfect? No. I'd vote for him again, though, because he has taken it further than any president ever has when it comes to fighting the oligarchy, which is controlling everything in America. But he has shown us, if one thing he has done this along with the internet, with Musk buying Twitter, which is now X. He has shown the country exactly the corruption and the fraud that has gone on for decades. And there's no unseeing it now. So we're at a crossroad moment in this country, particularly with this bill. We go full on banana republic if this does not pass.
I agree with you on that.
Full on banana republic.
I agree with you 1,000%. If I'm going to the voting booths, if I'm going to the polls, okay, and my vote is being nullified by a dead person or somebody who's not a
citizen. How about that? How about someone who just came here for the sole reason to harness their votes? Why do you think they were giving them stuff? By the way, here's the irony of it all. And this is why New York, we're going to talk about New York, is underwater for money. They're having people come in, putting them up in hotels, giving them this, giving them that, giving them this. Guess who's paying for it? Us. Guess what that vote does? It takes away our power. So we're paying people to take away our power. That's the irony of it. That includes Democrats. Right. They are the result. All of this immigration is the reason why housing costs went up, why your insurance went up, while wages went down, low income jobs went down. That's why fast food is expensive now. That's why diners cost too much money. That's why.
You know what breakfast in Scottsdale, Arizona cost me, my wife, and my son with tax and tip?
$80.
$60. And I'm talking about some pancakes and eggs. I'm not talking about anything elaborate. I'm talking about like bacon, eggs, and pancakes and stuff like that.
Joe, I went to Popeyes. Like an 8-piece chicken with French fries is $24.
Yep, 8-piece chicken.
$24 in
used
Popeyes,
to be $7.99. No, we're going to talk about that because Pierre Polyev made a good point to Joe Rogan. Joe, let's address something for a minute because our good friend, our dear friend Antonella, is in the chat room, and she made a point that I would like to ask you about. She says, "Are USA citizens still discussing left and right?" Antonella, I'll throw something out to you and Joe for your thoughts. I do believe that the right is a legitimate political force. I believe the left is a destructive, revolutionary force. I think they show that with all the policies, positions that they take. I think that the right is willing to have discussions amongst itself. And we're seeing that now. A lot of people on the right are arguing with each other, some somewhat viciously. But I do believe that there is a left and a right. Because no, even though there's 75% of Democrats that would vote for the SAVE Act, I still don't have a lot in common with those people. I applaud them that they want people to show ID and proof of citizenship and do away with mail-in ballots. I do applaud that. That's a common ground, okay? But that party has gone so far off the deep end. So I would think you're right, Antonella, about Republican and Democrat, because I do believe it's plain as the nose on your face that we do have, as Joe and Joe have said, and many people, a uniparty, Okay, we do. It's very, very corrupt. It's the swamp that Trump called it. But left, right, I do believe are legitimate political categories that we could place ourselves in. I'm not a knee-jerk right-winger. I've rethought a lot of things in my life, but I'm not gonna go so far as to lump them both together and say that there's not a clear distinction. Not so much as if you were talking about Republican and Democrat. Republican and Democrat, that's where I would agree with you. Your thoughts, Joe Resinella?
What I would say is the two parties, both of which are flawed, as far as Democrat, Republican. Right now, the Democrats are crazy. And many Democrats are saying that, one of which is a senator, John Fetterman, has said that. He said the Democratic position is Trump derangement syndrome. He just went on a whole tirade on this. He's a Democratic senator. It's crazy versus common sense. Both of which are flawed. It's crazy versus common sense. The Democrats have to get it reeled back in. How that happens, I don't know, but I'm going to say this, and this is according to CNN. Their numbers are the lowest they have ever been since the party has been formed. That's according to CNN. Look it up. If the Democratic Party does not rethink its positions, they will go out of existence as many other parties have in the history of America. They have to rethink their position. The 25% of the true believers of this crazy ideology cannot hold the country together, the power structure that is. And that is exactly why they're fighting for their life with regard to this SAVE Act. And that is exactly why they brought people in from the border in the numbers that they did, because the Latino vote was no longer secured, and they know that. And that was proven out in the last election. And 1 in 5 African-American males voted for Trump, and that number is going to grow, and they knew that too.
Right.
So they had to import people. That is the playbook that Europe followed, and that's the playbook that Canada is still following. So it's not a secret. This is not some esoteric idea that some think tank came up with. It's anyone who has their eyes open and is paying attention.
Joe, you're absolutely right. Well, listen, they're going to have to pay attention to Trump on immigration because he's pulling out all the stops.
Banks to take part in an immigration crackdown. What I mean by that is sources tell CNN the administration is considering requiring financial institutions to collect and verify their customers' citizenship status, something banks aren't currently required to do. One source says the new policy could come through an executive order. CNN's Matt Egan is following this story for us. So, Matt, what are you learning about how banks are responding to this possibility?
Yeah, well, Omar, this does appear to be part of the Trump administration's aggressive immigration crackdown. Sources tell CNN's Priscilla Alvarez and I that the administration is considering new action that would require banks to check the citizenship status of their customers. Now, this would be something that would actually apply not just on a go-forward basis, but also to existing customers, which is pretty stunning when you think about just how many customers the banks already have. Now, this action could also require banks to check a different category of documents than what they normally look at, including passports. Now, I do want to stress that nothing here has been announced or finalized. It's not clear here whether or not this would come in the form of an executive order or some other action. We reached out to the White House, and a spokesperson said that any reporting on policy that hasn't been officially announced is just speculation. But some Republicans do support this. Republican Senator Tom Cotton, he put out a post on X yesterday where he said, "I strongly support President Trump taking action to prevent illegal migrants from accessing our banking system." And he said he sent a letter to Treasury last fall asking for an investigation into this matter, and that he plans to introduce legislation on this issue shortly. Now, Omar, you asked about how the industry is reacting. Officially, they're not really saying much, right? Representatives from major banks, from bank trade groups, they haven't commented on this. However, sources do tell CNN that the industry is concerned here because they're worried that this kind of action, it could almost compel them to be part of the administration's immigration crackdown.
They should be part of the immigration crackdown. All businesses. Joe, my job Okay, I don't tell people where I work because I don't want to get doxxed. Heaven knows if some of my coworkers saw the front line with Joe and Joe, I'd probably be on the unemployment line. By the way, my partner in crime, Joe Rossinello, was doxxed a while back. So don't think I'm being so hyperbolic when I said twice, by the way. I don't think they liked our political views, and they certainly don't like our religious views. Now, here's the thing, Joe. In my capacity at my job, one of the things I do is when people are hired, okay, I have to take their information and enter it, not on a piece of paper, not handwritten, into a system that my company has bought, made the investment in, that runs their ID. Now, its passport is the primary ID, or you could do driver's license and social security card, okay? If that name and that information that I put in goes through that system, it literally only takes 10 seconds. 10 seconds for this precaution, okay? So that my company is not going to get raided by ICE because we're hiring illegal workers, all right? And that's happened, by the way. I'm in Arizona. I've a number of different locations that I know of. Other companies have been raided by ICE, and restaurants completely shut down because their whole staff, because they don't have this safeguard in place. Now, where am I going with this? Joe, it takes 10 seconds. I put in the information, I hit submit. It runs that person's information through a system at lightning speed and pops back. It'll say case closed, which means that person is fine and eligible to work in the United States. Or it'll say, we need to review this further. And then there's a certain requirement on the part of the potential employee that they're going to have to provide further information. That means they got flagged, Joe. That means that it went through Homeland Security and it got flagged. The person's not eligible to work in the United States. And after 2 weeks, we're allowed to say to that person, you can't work here anymore because they've not been what's called verified. Why is it that the banks can't do that when it comes to illegals? Do the same thing.
They could do it so simple, Joe. Joe, the law is already on the books to prevent this. The reason why it's not used, and what do I mean by those laws? It's illegal to hire somebody in America. There's a law on the books right now. It's been in law for since the 50s. If you're not an American citizen, you cannot hire someone. If you're not an American citizen, you cannot rent them. You like a place. You have like a 2-family house. There's laws at present. Now you add this law to it. Why isn't those 2 laws enforced? Because illegal immigration, they're used by our corporate structure. It's cheap labor. That's why no president, Republican or Democrat, has ever passed something that there was bipartisan approval. Never. Because they want that. Why? Now let's step back further. Because it keeps the price of goods low. If we had a legit process where all we had to do, we don't need a wall. You don't need to have ICE. All you have to do is enforce the law. If you hire somebody, you just use an example, a restaurant, and I am the government, the law's on the books, and I catch you, I fine you $1 million, you go out of business.
Right.
If you're a construction company, and I catch you, I fine you $500,000, you go out of business. Guess what won't happen? They won't do it.
That's right.
If you have a 2-family house, and I catch you renting to someone who's not a citizen, I fine you. And guess what? You won't do it. So guess what won't happen? There'll be no illegal immigration. Same thing with a bank. You need a bank account. Everything isn't done with cash. So if the banks, you passed a law that you don't need a wall. But why isn't it done? Because it keeps the price of goods low. If we had a legit system, you said that breakfast cost you $60. Joe, it would cost $100. Restaurants would go out of business. The cost of vegetables would be extremely, extremely expensive. The cost of fruit would be very, very expensive. The average, first of all, restaurants, it would be something where only rich people can go to restaurants. It's already getting like that, but it would be even more so. And that's why those laws aren't enforced. So let's be clear. both sides. This isn't about helping people. They're using these people. Now, I'm for immigration. And the United States, by the way, has a very generous immigration policy. Legally speaking, every year we let in close to 1 million people legally. The
Right.
people who use these, what do they call it? These visas, blue, like, I don't know, like from people from India come in.
H-1B visas, I think.
Used to undercut American employees and paying them less money. And then you have the illegals that come in the border that do all the hard work that Americans supposedly don't want. But I disagree with that because I think a lot of Americans would take those jobs because they can't find work. So here's the deal. These people are nothing more than a tool of the oligarchs, and they're being used. How about we do things the right way? How about we do things the right way? But we're not willing to do so.
Well, the thing is this, that's why we need the SAVE Act, because there's a lot more people out there that think on these common sense levels, whether it comes to showing ID and proving your citizenship, if you're going to open a bank account, all of it, okay? There's a lot of level-headed people out there that are in favor of this. Harkening back to our discussion on the SAVE Act, that's why they don't want the SAVE Act, because Republicans must not want it because they know that they rigged their own elections. In other words, and there's a whole slew of things that we can't get into here at the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe, I remember having a conversation with somebody years ago about how incumbents in the House of Representatives, everything is tilted towards them. The money, the advertising, all sorts of things, just so they can ensure their own power. The SAVE Act, or that they're going to retain their seat, not only against let's say it's a Republican, not only against a Democrat opponent, but also in their own primaries. If you have a legit election, you know what's going to happen? I'm going to go out and vote for my neighbor Joe, a third Joe. I'm going to go out and vote for another guy named Joe to go and primary David Schweiker, okay, because he's my congressman in this district. I want to and know that there could be a legit outcome that's going to unseat a guy like Schweiker. In other words, but that's why they're so hesitant to do all this, okay? And I just don't understand that when the shit, pardon my language, but when the shit comes down, and it's going to come down. When you look at we're going to talk about inflation in a second. When you talk about inflation, when you talk about debt, when you talk about the money supply, when you talk about how our whole middle class has been eroded, all right? When it all comes down, these guys aren't going to have a chair to sit in either. I don't care. We've said a million times. You know what would happen if the dollar got devalued by a significant amount due to an economic collapse? Do you think a guy's got $10 million in the bank is going to say, well, I got mine? Your money's going to be worth 10% of what you have in the bank, dude. You're going to be on the bread line with the rest of us. And if you're not immediately, you will be shortly. Okay. You don't understand. You think everything is so short-sighted. That's my aggravation. I know this is a rant. That's my aggravation and my frustration with John Thune. You're a short-sighted person, Senator Thune. Okay, this is meant to stabilize an already, what would you call it, Joe? Disgruntled citizenry?
Oh, 100%. Like I said, we go full banana republic. This doesn't pass, Joe. It's full on banana.
Well, would you listen to a Republican if they got up there and started talking without election? I'm going to say you're
like
full
I
of
said,
crap too.
pure theater. I won't if this does not pass, I will absolutely not pay attention to any election ever moving forward. I could just speak for me. Ever. It means nothing to me. Nothing.
No.
And I'm not alone in that. And there, believe me, that's why the numbers are the numbers. That's why 71% of Democrats feel the same way I do.
At least on that issue, they do. But I'll tell you something. Sometimes you do need to talk to people like they're in the first grade and explain it as though the person you're talking to is like they're in the first grade.
You know, just making dollar bills with nothing behind it, nothing to back it.
This is the biggest fraud perpetrated on the working class people in the last 100 years.
Printing money is just insane. It's just the idea you just print more money. It's like, and people go, oh, okay.
Well, it looks painless at first,
Right.
But if you have an economy with 10 apples and $10, it's $1 an apple. You double the number of dollars to 20, but you still only have 10 apples. Well, all of a sudden it's $2 an apple. And it's not that the cost of apples has gone up. It still costs the same resources to grow and pick the apples. It's that the price has gone up because the value of the money has gone down.
Right.
So in America, Over the last 55 years, you've doubled the number of homes in America from about 70 million to 150 million. You know how much the money supply has grown? 30 times. So you have twice the homes, but 30 times the cash. So what's happened? Housing costs have gone up 15-fold in 55 years. And now an entire generation of kids can't afford homes. We have exactly the same problem in Canada. This is the biggest wealth transfer from the working class to the elites, from, I say, the have-nots to the have-yachts. And Washington and Wall Street love it, by the way, because it inflates the stock market, it inflates the bureaucracy. Politicians get to spend, CEOs get their stocks inflated. But it destroys the working people, and we need to get back to hard money. Everything should be getting cheaper, by the way. You know, it takes 60 to 80% less resources to grow food. We grow 4 times the food on the same acre, get 4 times as much milk from the same cow. We use 80% less water and fertilizer. So why isn't it that food is not less expensive? It's because all of those gains are being erased by monetary inflation. So it's not that food is more costly, it's that the money we use to buy it has less purchasing power. And we need to do what the Swiss do, which is they don't print money. They have balanced budgets, they have almost no deficit, and they have almost zero inflation in Switzerland. They have the strongest money in the world, the Swiss franc. And we would all be better if we operated like the Swiss when it comes to our money.
So in a real-world scenario, it's like you take over Canada, how would you go about implementing this?
You got to cut bureaucracy, consultants, which consume, by the way, $26 billion of spending.
How big is your debt in Canada?
1.3-ish trillion.
Oh, that's baby debt.
It's compared to you. You guys are
We're
really
ridiculous.
Wild. But, you know...
Yeah, we're ridiculous, all right. But do you see how easy it is to explain? And everything that Pierre Poilievre said, I know that a lot of people in our chat room and our friends here at the front line with Joe and Joe are not the biggest fans of Poilievre, and he said things that really have baffled me. But he was absolutely right in what he said to Joe Rogan. This is basic economics. But what they've done is they've made it where they've taken what should be just a basic economic system, free market system, and they have perverted it so bad, particularly through monetary policy. He said the last 100 years. What happened 100 years ago? The Federal Reserve was created, the creature from Jekyll Island. Okay, the IRS was not created long after that. Okay, because in order for them to have their way, all right, all debt that the United States incurs has to be backed by the full faith, credit, and taxing power of the United States government. And that's the place, just little by little, sometimes not so little, over time, you end up with the system that you have now, where, as he said, an apple costs you $2. Believe me, I have a wife who goes shopping, and she tells me, baffled when she comes home, all right, she goes, I can't believe the prices they charge at the store. And the reasons why are everything Pierre Poilievre just said. Joe Rossinello, what say you?
Listen, this is why we have to take our country back. And this is why Donald Trump, like I said, he's given us a little more than a lot of other presidents in terms of executive orders, in terms of basically some laws. He hasn't passed many laws, by the way. Just so you know, executive orders come and go. But Donald Trump at least is presenting and or signing legislation that has given us a little bit of power back, particularly what we're trying to get forth right now, the SAVE Act, that gives us some power back as people. It is not even an argument what Pierre Poilievre just said. It's not even an argument. Why we stand for this as a people, I just don't understand. And ultimately, this is mine. I've said this. This is why I got kicked off of Facebook. I'm in, for those who know me, who may be listening.
You're in Facebook prison.
I'm in Facebook jail. And because I basically said, why do we pay taxes? Why are we paying taxes to a government that basically is robbing us? And they are. They are robbing us. He just laid it out in a small way. Do you know, and we're going to talk about New York down the road, I'll give you a perfect example. Do you know that a study was just conducted that if they looked at all the homeless people in New York City, and I go into New York City and I see them, the city of New York pays $81,000 a year per homeless person in New York. This is not my numbers. This was on CNN too, by the way. So it's not Fox News propaganda. So if you think I'm lying, look it up at CNN. And That number is higher than the median salary in America. Yet homelessness is pervasive in New York City. So what are they doing with that money? It's graft. It's going to different things. I have to pay. I just did my taxes. I have to give New York City, because I work part-time in New York. I have a flex schedule, $6,000 a year. I have to write a check to New York for $6,000. What do you think that money is going to be used for? Why
Going in
should
some corrupt politician's
Of course
pocket.
it is. It's going to go to something else to undermine the country.
Right.
Why are we paying taxes? You see, I've said this. I'm going to say it again. If I was the candidate, I'm not looking to be a candidate, but the next candidate, it's very clear that Donald Trump, to a large extent, did not go as far as he said he was going to or should have gone, as far as fighting against the swamp, call it the deep state, call it whatever you want, the oligarchs, the uniparty, whatever you want to call it. The next move, if you ask me, and I've said this is why I think I got kicked off Facebook, and I don't care, I'm going to say it again. We should stop paying taxes.
Okay, I want to stay there a second. And I've thought this for years, and I want to mention it here at the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe, you do know, and I've heard this said by very smart people. Fact check me if I'm wrong about this out there watching at the front line with Joe and Joe. You could tell your employer you do not want taxes taken out of your check. However, your employer is going to be reluctant to do that, because then what the IRS does is they threaten to audit your employer. They say, don't allow that person to do that. And by law, I should be allowed to do that. But they will threaten your employer with the force of the IRS, which is the power that they have, Joe, is a lot more than most people think when it comes to what they can actually do to a person's life or do to a corporation. That's why, and why am I bringing this up? That's why they take the taxes out of your check before you spend one dime on you, your wife, and your 5 kids. They take it out ahead of time because they know the country's founded on what? A tax revolt. That's like you and me, and the way we would say it in North Jersey Italians is, I ain't paying. Did you ever play like AC-Deucey, Joe? Remember the card games we played?
Sure.
All right. And the pots get real big, and you got a no-brainer hand. All right. And you go, pot. I bet the pot. But the thing is, there's $800 in the pot. Okay. You don't realize it, but it's been building up over the last few hands because nobody won. And then when the card comes out and you're a loser, your reaction to that is, I ain't paying. But you still owe $800. My point is, we can't say I ain't paying because they go into our checks to take our money. They go into our checks to take the taxes out.
Well, they already did that.
Real quick, Joe, for the reason that you brought up. Because I don't care, you talk about no right, left, Democrat, Republican. You ask a regular working guy, would he rather have to have all his money in his pocket, in his bank account to spend on him and his family? Send me a bill at the end of the year. You know what people do if they start to organize, particularly now with social media? Say, we're going to form a tax revolt. We're not going to pay.
Well, I would love that, but you could even do that now because there's still a lot of people that pay taxes, like to the government, in excess of what comes out of your paycheck. Like as in now, because we're in tax season, I'm paying $6,000 to New York. I have to pay also. I'm not getting money. I'm paying federal. I'm paying money. So my point is, just stop. Say no. We're not giving you anything. When I start seeing Somali fraud in California, you're paying $81,000 for the quote unquote each homeless person in New York, and there's still homelessness in the city, which is more than the average salary. We're not giving you money. It's right. Over. You can't arrest everybody. You see, that's the type of stuff that gets their attention. We're at that point, if you ask me, because the fraud is just in your face. They're not even hiding it anymore, Joe.
You mentioned we were talking here at the front line with Joe and Joe about the SAVE Act. Joe, what if you had a bunch of people that think like we do, that got elected to the House and Senate, and they looked at the leaders in both parties, Thune, Schumer, whoever the case might be, say we are going to pass legislation that says the IRS can no longer take money out of the paychecks of working Americans. You can't take the money. You send the tax bill like you were describing. In New York, they send you a bill, you pay the tax. And I would say, If I was Senator Pasillo from Arizona, God forbid, but if I was, all right, I would stand on the floor of the Senate and say, so we give the American people the option of forming a tax revolt or a tax boycott until the government starts to do the right thing. That's where we're going to give that power back to the American people, and we are going to take power away from the IRS so that if the American people, now, if you got to legitimately pay your taxes, I would say you got to legit pay your taxes. But if the people of the United States of America formed a tax boycott, started a tax boycott or a tax revolt, I think they should have the option to do it.
I think that's the power play, because voting clearly isn't. Trump made many promises that he did not keep. He's kept a lot of them, but let's be honest, the Epstein deal, the wars thing, these are big things. The big, beautiful bill, which added a lot of debt to the country, these are things that I did not vote for. Voting is not the answer. And violence isn't the answer either. And just so people, I'm very clear, that's short term. That's short term. History proves that. It's short term. And then, frankly, you get somebody worse that comes in. This is real. Economic boycotts is what won India independence from the British Empire, the strongest empire in the world at the time, the City of London. That is what won them independence. They all in unison, the whole country, just said, we're not buying your crap. We're not buying your textiles. We're not using your salt. And Gandhi organized the whole country and they left. They walked out. You see, that's where we're at. Now, for it to get to that, listen, they did that at the Boston Tea Party. This is where I think we should be. Why should I give New York City $6,000? I have 5 kids. I work hard. Why? So they could piss it away on nonsense?
And didn't Nick Shirley prove that in Minneapolis?
This is my point. Why are we going along? Why are we going along with this?
Because the elections are rigged. That's why, Joe Rossinello. We said it on the show this whole hour, and we've been saying it. We don't trust elections because everything that we're saying, not because we're geniuses, but because we have common sense. Everything we're saying is common sense, yet the common sense people that we seem to vote for, we convince ourselves we're voting for, they try to convince us not to believe our own lying eyes. And you know what? It's really not that simple. No, it actually is. What's simple about it is that our proposed solutions are correct in their simplicity. They're genius, okay? And also, it's as simple as you not having as much power as you want. And and you mentioned New York City. Here you go.
He just proposed a utility hike on every New Yorker. Except he didn't call it that. He called it a 9.5% property tax increase. Before you call me dramatic, hear me out.
So, where are we?
Utility companies like Con Edison and National Grid pay property taxes on their infrastructure right here in New York City. And under New York's rate-making system, those costs are passed directly through to the customers. Former Public Service Commission Chair John Howard said it best, quote, "You're not taxing Con Edison, you're taxing customer." Right now, roughly 25 to 30% of the delivery portion of your bill is taxes. And electric and gas bills are already scheduled to rise. About 10% for electric and nearly 16% for gas over the next 3 years, adding roughly $600 more, wait for it, per household annually by 2028. Now layer a 9.5% property tax increase on top of that. Those taxes don't disappear, they show up on your bill. Property taxes are one of the largest expenses for operating multifamily housing in New York. And when those taxes go up, they show up as, say it with me, higher rent. A rent increase, it raises rent. So when you hear property tax increase, what you're really hearing is higher utility bills, higher housing costs, and higher costs of living here in New York. This isn't.
Now, here's the thing if you or I did that video, what you're going to get is what Tim Walz did in Minnesota to Nick Shirley. Well, he's a white supremacist. Okay. How about this? Governor Walz? Because Mamdani would say that to us too. That would be his only defense. Well, they're just disgruntled white guys. Okay. What are you going to say to that guy? Because that guy actually looks like Mamdani. Okay. He's a different color. He's got a brownish hue to his skin. Okay. And he's saying the truth. You can't dismiss people by just attacking them as racist, this and that. You know why, Joe? Because I don't care if you're black, white, or brown. The only color that matters when it comes to a lot of this nonsense is the green. It's the green in your pocket and the green that they're taking out. You think they give a crap what color you are when they're picking your pocket, when they take that $6,000 check from you. And by the way, hundreds of thousands of people like you who don't even live in New York. Don't even live in New York. And then you got to pay city tax. You got to pay. I remember when I was a stockbroker in another life, I had to pay city tax. What the hell's that all? I don't live in the city. I work in the city. My firm's in the city. I don't live here. Why do I got to pay that? My larger point is, you see how he in one minute and a half cut through all the nonsense, the jargon, the propaganda. We're going to raise property taxes on those rich people. No, you're not. No, you're not. Who do you think is going to pay that, Mom Donnie? And that guy right there just pointed it out. You're just taxing working and middle-class people. That's all you're doing. You think you're going to prevent them from passing on the cost that you're imposing on them in the form of rent, in the form of higher utility bills? That's what affects me. Some people say, well, $600 a year. Well, that's not a lot of money. Oh, yeah? You make that person's income and try to pay that $600 a year, $50 a month that you got to pay. In other words, and that I believe was the increase. That wasn't the actual bill that was the increase in what you're going to be paying. Joe, I'll put it like this to you. If you ask me, aside from our Catholic show that we do, that's on the Veritas Catholic Radio Network, I love doing this because I want to bring souls to Jesus Christ. I do. I also love doing this secondarily, but very important. I want, in my wildest dreams, you and I were able to start a movement like we're talking about in America. It's possible. It's certainly possible. Okay. We need everybody out there to like, subscribe, and share and get our voices out there a little bit more. But nonetheless, because this resonates with people. You want to know why? Because in this regard, when we're talking about this, okay, this does cut across party lines. Because whether you have a D or an R at the end of your name, and that's the way you vote, all right, you're a working class person, you need to sift through this nonsense. Because as you mentioned earlier, Joe, it's only 25% of the Democrat Party are the real wackos. Those are the people you see on social media that think boys can be girls. The regular middle-class guy maybe doesn't care about that so much, okay? But nonetheless, he doesn't agree with it, but he still votes Democrat. These are the types of things that cut across the party lines because they're very commonsensical, okay? And I wish we could wait. I pray, not wish. Wishing's superstitious. I pray that we're able to affect our country in a positive way, that they could sift through a lot of this nonsense. Joe, I'll throw it over to you.
I know we're coming to the end. I just want to end it on this. I want to make a correction. And I'm also interested in Joe Pasillo's comments. And I have some comments too, because this has gone on from something we talked about last week throughout the week. Religious Liberty Conference, Carrie Prejean Bowler made some statements. She was asked to leave the particular committee. Last week, I said that Bishop Barron was in the meeting when she made her statements. That wasn't true. He was not in the meeting. However, the conversation has bled into all of this week. I'm interested in Joe's comments. I'm going to make my own as well. I've followed it a little bit. It's gotten pretty heated. I actually think it's kind of disgraceful, to be truthful with you, on a lot of fronts. Nasty. Barron has made some statements. People have applauded his statements, basically clarifying what the church's position was. He basically said Israel has a right to exist. There is no biblical entitlement to the land, and anti-Semitism is a sin. That is the church position. That's been criticized. I've seen people compliment him. I've heard people criticize him. Ultimately, that is the position of the church and has always been. No matter where you are on it, the nastiness is not Catholic and should stop. It should stop. You have a right to your opinion. All people have a right to your opinion. You're not entitled to change doctrine. Doctrine is doctrine. But the nastiness, I have seen things said, Joe, from quote unquote Catholic people. I swear, I don't comment. I just read and I do observe and I do see, is sad. And I just want to end it with that.
I will say this, and I really want to try to be objective in the whole thing. When I was watching the original clip of Carrie Prejean Bowler in that committee, the one that went viral, okay, that led to her being on Tucker and everything else, I did feel in my heart, okay, I was cringing a little bit because I didn't know if that was the right place and time for what she was doing. Okay. But at the end of the day, she said something. Okay. And this is something where I didn't think Bishop Barron, and I read his response to her.
Yeah, I read it too.
Where I thought that he fell short a little bit. You're right. He said, this is what the church teaches. He agreed. But then he went on to criticize her behavior, leaving that aside. But see, this is my point. And you and I interviewed Gavin DaCosta on this very topic. All right. And it's out there at the front line with Joe and Joe. You could watch it. And Joe, I got to be honest, I didn't think we were squishy in the interview. Okay. We asked the right questions and pertinent questions. Here's the one thing that Bishop Barron didn't do. And this is what Carrie Prejean Bowler is calling for. And this is where I'm gonna agree with her on this point. Bishop Barron, we need to define what all forms of anti-Semitism means. You can't tell me I'm going to commit an act. Let's say I'm going to be critical of Israel on some level. And then I have to wait to see if the response is going to be, oh, that's anti-Semitic. You're not being clear with me. I want to know what the definition of anti-Semitism is. And no, I'm not going to hear or listen to it and say, well, I know it when I see it. No, that's not the right answer. See, I know what racism is when I see it. That's why I don't believe a lot of the people that use the word racist, because they throw that word around like it's become meaningless. I find that anti-Semitism has become the same thing. To me, it's meaningless, not because I think it's a meaningless or I don't think it's a real thing. I do think it's a real thing. There are people in this world who hate Jews for being Jews. Okay, I agree. I know that there are.
See, that to me is anti-Semitism.
What's that?
That to me is what anti-Semitism
That
is.
to me is an objective. That is objectively anti-Semitic. But you're leaving this door open for those, yes, many of whom are Jews, to say, well, that's anti-Semitic. Okay, but you're not defining what it is for me. I want to know what it is, and that is where I know the teaching, and Bishop Barron wrote the teaching in his response. He said the teaching is the church condemns all forms of anti-Semitism. But you're not telling me what all forms of anti-Semitism means, and that's my issue.
No, again, it comes down to being respectful, and that was a respectful statement. I also think sometimes people, whether they believe it or not, or realize it or not, their politics gets weaved in to their religion. I'm not saying that's you. In that statement, that was a very objective, plain vanilla statement. But that is, I think, some of where the nastiness is coming. The church is apolitical. The church has a position, and the bishop's job is to state the position. Now, again, it went crazy back and forth. Did he leave this out? Did he not say this? Ultimately, if you ask me, it's not even his place to say why she was let go. And one could even say, to your point, it wasn't the time and the place to get into that argument in that forum. With that said, the bishop's job is to state what the church teaches and state it clearly. And to be honest with you, she is Catholic. And I'm glad that he made a statement. Some people don't like it. Some people like it. But I'm glad that he did respond. And that is a good thing, like it or not. And the church should always respond. We have to be a voice in the culture. As in not just us, the laity, and we have been very vocal, but the priests and the bishops and the cardinals on everything. That is our job.
I'm going to say this to you, and then we'll bring it to an end. You made a very good point. You said there's people that use this issue and weave it into their politics. And in that case, I'm being honest here. My problem is not with the Jews. My problem is not with support of Israel. You know who, again, this is rock solid Catholic teaching too. You know who my problem is with more than anybody? It's the evangelical Christian Zionists. I have more of a problem with them. You could argue over American foreign policy. You can argue whether or not America, and a lot of people do it, Democrat, Republican, they say, why are we giving all this money to Israel? Why they ask the why question a lot vis-a-vis Israel. My problem's not with that. That's the discussion that you could have, all right? And I don't want to be called anti-Semitic for having that conversation or questioning certain things. My problem is with the Christian Zionists, who say, like Mike Huckabee, no, or Ted Cruz, no, you must go to war because that's the Israel of the Bible. That they're the people that are using this as for political reasons. I don't think Kerry Pragine Bowler did that. I think she was basically saying, I think her heart was in the right place. Again, venue-wise, I might have waited a little bit. Having said that, though, she's like, I want to know, am I an anti-Semite if I do not favor Zionism? No, and quite honestly, that's what got her in trouble. That's not necessarily what got her in trouble with the rabbi either. But it did get her in trouble with that Paula White, who's an insane person, by the way. Sorry, she's an insane person, and Trump is insane to have her there as his spiritual director. And Dan Patrick. My problem is with them. That's my issue. Joe, I'll give you the final word.
The church has been very clear on, and that's what one of the many things I think that Bishop Barron made clear was the church does not support a biblical right to the land. That is a heresy, and that has been stated many, many, many years ago. We do not prescribe to that. That's purely an evangelical position, and it is alive and well to this day. Many of those people are in our government, and they believe that tooth and nail, that somehow man is going to push God in a direction if we rebuild the temple and force, well, maybe not use the word force, encourage God to send back Jesus as a result of that new temple, which will never be built again. And they believe that. That is part of their religious beliefs.
They believe that. They honestly believe. I don't know if they've read history. The temple, there was an attempt to rebuild the temple, and God stopped it. Okay, when
70
Julian
years
the
after Christ's death, what was it? Julian the
Apostate. Julian the Apostate said he, like his name says, he apostatized. He was born Catholic. He was baptized. I think he was Constantine's grandson. Okay, and he said, and he apostatized. And he's like, well, you know what? We could disprove the whole thing. All we got to do is rebuild the temple. And fire came out of the ground as they tried to lay the foundation. Okay,
that's historic, by the way. You could look that up. That is historic. He did try and he did fail. And also, ultimately, just from a Catholic perspective, Christ is the new temple. Jesus said this. This is also biblical. Jesus's body is the sacrifice. He is the new temple. That is what we believe as Catholics. That's where we differentiate our belief from our Protestant brothers and sisters. And Barron did say that. You don't have a biblical right to the land.
He did. He did say
and
that.
For that, I give him a lot of credit. Give credit where credit's due. I'm glad he said it, and that is clear teaching.
Well, I hate to see Carrie Pragine Bowler become the lightning rod here, but and again, she made a decision to use that time and place to make those statements. I will say this. Let's try it. God will draw the greatest good out of any situation. Let's hope a real, and I want her included in it. I do. I think she was speaking from her heart. I want her included in the conversation. I think she was dealt with very, very shabbily by Dan Patrick and Paula White. And I'm not saying anything negative about Bishop Barron. You know, we respect Bishop Barron on this show. But I do hope that a real, authentic dialogue that many people have been calling for a very long time on this very topic ensues. And I hope it's productive and I hope it's fruitful. Joe Rossinello, great conversation as always. And just a really good chat room today. Very active, hundreds of comments going through the chat room. And we love you guys all. Antonella, EC2, Carabene, Eric's in there. So we got a bunch of people, and we just want to thank you, as always, for joining us here at the front line with Joe and Joe. So we go live on Sundays where we have these conversations. Hopefully you find them informative or entertaining or both. Like, subscribe, and share. Share on YouTube. I know most of the people here are on YouTube, but if you are watching on X or Facebook, help us out. We do post our interview shows. I would encourage anybody on the Israeli issue, the church and basically the church and the Jews, Catholic Jewish dialogue. Gavin DaCosta, we posted that on YouTube. We posted that on Facebook. We posted that on X. And relative to our audience size, it got a lot of views across the board. So it did get out there. And we thought it was a good conversation, and hopefully it leads to further conversation. Gerard's in the chat room. Gerard, always beautiful seeing my brother. So we want to thank you all. God bless you. We'll be here next Sunday again. And remember, until then, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We'll talk to you soon.